And happy Wednesday, everyone. It is Wednesday. It's almost the draft, and this is the Seahawks FanTable. And we have special guests joining us. As with us always is Ross and Sybil on deck, but today we've got a special guest. Special guest, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Matty Brown. You can find me on Twitter at MattyFBrown. I cover the Big 12 and NFC West for InsideThePylon.com and the NFL for SkySports.com. And my latest project is a joint collaboration with Inside the Pylon. We've currently got a draft guide on sale, quite fitting for this show. It's done how an NFL team scouts, so positional scouts reporting to a hierarchy. And Dan Hatman, who worked in a couple of NFL front offices, oversaw it all. I scouted running backs, cornerbacks, and safeties, and the draft guide's available at www.itpdraftguide.com. And thanks very much for having me.
So officially the only guy here who knows anything about football.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's the plan.
Well, the great news is Maddie is going to actually help us a lot here with the draft, with this pre-draft podcast, because this is really all we're going to be talking about. Obviously, there are a couple of things that have happened in the past few weeks. Free agency has kind of slowly dwindled down, and Seahawks made a move. It's something that people have been talking about for, honestly, almost 2 years now. Since Marshawn Lynch retired, he's officially been traded to Oakland. Maddie, you've been looking at the draft. We've been looking at the draft. How often does something like this really happen? I mean, the closest thing that I can remember is maybe Brett Favre, half decade ago.
What move are you talking about?
The move for Marshawn Lynch to be traded to Oakland.
Oh. Well, it's very rare. I think the Seahawks did really well to get anything for the pick, and it shows the good relationship that John Schneider has with Reggie McKenzie. I think they did really well to swap. It was 5th for 6th, wasn't it? Next year. And I heard they touted trying to swap first this year, which I don't think Reggie was too keen on. But yeah, I'm delighted with the move, and I think they've done well by Marshawn as well. And I think there's no real loser here.
And what's interesting is last week we had our off-season podcast, and I believe all of us said it wasn't going to happen. We all thought it was more publicity than it was real. I know, Matty, you had mentioned that on your Twitter. We had talked about it. A lot of people thought that this wasn't going to happen. Ross, you were the most adamant about what the Seahawks should do.
Yes, I was.
How are you feeling about this?
To be honest, more than anything, I'm just kind of over it. I mean, we talked back and forth. And again, if they're going to get something for it, then I'm fine. Everybody goes their separate ways. I want to say, I'm happy for everybody. There's no losers kind of thing. I agree there's no losers. I can't really say I'm really, really ecstatic for Lynch. To be honest, his last 2 years in Seattle kind of soured me a bit on him. I still respect what he did. I still think he's already a Hall of Fame player, because how I think Hall of Fame should be just slightly different. I think it's memorable plays and things like that, not just pure numbers. But to be honest, I mean, come on, dude. At the end of the day, you're saying this guy refused to play for you. I refuse to play for the guys who played with me before. I would want to play in a hometown that just got screwed over by the team I'm going to play for now. It's not really a thing for me. That's it.
Zeb, you and I were kind of similar on this. We were excited. I went a little bit crazy and said that I think it would be cool to have a Marshawn Lynch Oakland jersey. You said that's kind of crossing the line. What's your take on Marshawn playing in Oakland? You're going to watch Oakland Raider games now that you probably weren't going to watch last year, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. I'll tune in. I'm pretty sure last week I said I thought that it was actually going to happen, but I might be mistaken. Maybe
you might have said it. I know Ross and I definitely said it wasn't going to happen, but
I think most importantly for us is the timing, because it just so happens that both Danny Cannell and Trent Dilfer became available today. So maybe that makes some room for making a move there.
If you aren't aware of what Zeb's referencing, ESPN let go a ton of their older staff, Trent Dilfer being one of their cuts. So
I'm thinking Danny Cannell.
They took 100 people, right? I mean, not just everybody's gone.
Yeah, they did a quick study, and they found that most of the people that were let go are over a certain age. So there's probably more tenured, more expensive people that they had to pay, and they decided to cut some costs. But ultimately, it's
they've still got Stephen A. Smith, so
yeah,
it's all good.
That would be a travesty. That would stretch the pond, if you will, on both sides.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're here to talk about the draft. So the draft is coming up tomorrow. 24 hours from now, the first round will have been completed. For those that you aren't familiar, the draft is now split amongst 3 days. First round tomorrow, Thursday. Second and third rounds on Friday, and then fourth through seventh rounds are on Saturday. Now, the biggest change to this year's draft is the fact that compensation picks are actually able to be traded. So this is kind of a unique thing where before compensatory picks are always locked in, you can trade them, but this year they have been able to be traded. Maddie, have you seen any big changes to the way that teams are moving around because they're getting more picks and they're giving more flexibility now?
Well, I think if the Seahawks are going to trade down, they may struggle to trade down in the first. And the fact that they'll be able to trade down from their third round compensatory picks is a really big deal. Schneider hasn't had less than he hasn't had less than 8 picks in a draft, I think, in his tenure in Seattle. So and we've only got 7 currently. So he'll clearly be looking to gain an extra pick. And I think that comp pick is crucial if he wants to trade down, because he's basically a 4th rounder. He could trade into, say, the mid-4th and pick up another pick on the way, perhaps.
Yeah. The interesting thing that I saw was John Schneider has made 14 trades, and through those trades, he's acquired 30 picks. So he's definitely a GM who's interested in cultivating a lot of young, cheap talent, and I think that's something that we'll probably see. So, guys, any thoughts on being able to trade draft picks, compensatory picks before we get into topic number 1?
I think it's important. We got to do it, right? We need depth. Isn't that a big thing? And we don't have a lot of picks like we normally do. So I think we're going to see a lot of wheeling and dealing and trading down and trying to stock up on those 4th, 5th, 6th rounders.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're missing a 4th and a 5th right now. So
yeah, exactly.
And it's kind of where we've made our bread and butter at times. So I'm looking forward to seeing, like you said, what we can do with the 3rds, getting more in the 4th and the 5th.
All right. Well, let's talk about topic number 1. So we all talked about this in multiple podcasts. Manny, I'm sure you've talked about it online, in your blogs, on Twitter, throughout the place. But the Seahawks talked a lot about depth, and the thing that they said was kind of their top priority was offensive line, running back, defensive back. They've made moves in free agency. They've got a wealth of linebackers, not necessarily all starters. They've signed 2 offensive linemen. They let Gary Gilliam go through restricted free agency. They have signed Eddie Lacy as their running back. But how does that change their draft? A lot of times people always say, you want to go in, make all the moves in free agency, and in the draft, you're going best player available. That seems like kind of the mindset that a lot of fans will definitely approach it as. GMs maybe not so much. Are those guys available for Seattle? Do they need to go offensive lineman, running back, or DB as the guys that Pete Carroll has kind of highlighted at the end of the year?
Well, I think they've done well to address the holes on the roster, but I think Gilliam going to 49ers, which not many of us were sad to see, but it happened, leaves a hole at right tackle. It would be a disaster for Fedi to be handed that spot, or Ibushi to be handed that spot without any real competition. I mean, we saw the effects of that last off-season with Gilliam himself. So I think that offensive line may be the pick at 26, but it's whether there's a premier offensive line talent there. I know a lot of mocks still have Bowles going at 26, but I'd still be very shocked if that were the case. I mean, he's a prototypical left tackle, really good athlete, and his 3-cone was only 0.02 seconds slower than Dalvin Cook. And in a zone blocking scheme like ours, him pulling and leading, I think he'd be ideal. So if he were there, I'd be ecstatic.
Is that who you have on your mock that the Seattle's take at 26?
I personally don't think he'd be there. I know Kevin King is quite a popular selection, but again, that's a big question mark, because his bump and run coverage is actually the thing he needs to work on the most. And obviously, the Seahawks like to play a lot of bump and run. And while he has the athletic tools to mold that and work on that. Seattle's never spent that high pick on a defensive back, and I don't know if King is someone. That's if he's even there. That is. So the thing I expect is I would not be shocked if they traded out of the first round, because there's a lot of players who are all on quite an equal footing. Some who could go in the first, some who could go in the second, depending on what board the team has in front of them.
So kind of follow up to that is, one of the things that I as a fan find really hard about the draft, and why I find myself kind of like not being able to get into it as much, is it's so unpredictable. There's so many things that can happen in the middle of the draft that changes everything. Like the things that I remember when I watched the draft is, quarterback number 2 has fallen 20 picks. That's happened throughout the NFL. So as a fan, I'm always like, I want to be interested, I want to be invested, but I kind of feel like the people that I should be excited about, they're never the people that are on who I assume is the radar, because there's so much cloak and dagger. Zeb, Ross, is that something that you guys feel?
Zeb, you want to start off?
What was the exact question?
How do you as a fan look at the draft when you see the picks that are available and what you think can happen or what actually ends up happening? How does that impact you as a fan?
Oh, I mean, I don't think it really impacts me as a fan. I know that over the years, less and less do I think I have a grasp on what's actually going on, no matter what I think about who they're going to go after or what they're going to do. They always seem to surprise me, so I've kind of stopped the whole predictions thing because it's not working out so well for me.
Ross, what about you?
That almost exactly mirrors my experience. I mean, like, hardcore fan, a long time, but a few years ago, I finally started getting really, really serious about trying to look at the draft. And I did it 2 years in a row and really spent some serious time, and found it to be really an exercise in frustration, because it just never. Yeah, I mean, like, you have to be like, it's more about art and it's more about ESP than anything else, I think. Trying to get inside John Schneider's mind. I think the Seahawks actually in particular are difficult because they say they don't go by best player available, but they also don't draft exactly by need. They have sort of like their own thing where, like, how they evaluate people and how they value them is all about certain particular skills and talents, whatever. And it's really, really hard to get a handle on how they see that, I think. So I mostly just let the draft happen, and after it happens in the past, I've kind of read up on it, and then I decide whether I'm happy or not. So, yeah.
So, Maddie, for you that does this as, part of more than just, a hobby, as something that you want to grow into and build a career off of, how do you get fans like us more informed? Because a lot of people look at mocks, a lot of people look at multiple mocks, and a lot of people try and mock their own. But most fans are not fans of all 32 teams, so they don't really know always what each team is going to look after, because so many things can change. How do you try and get people involved and invested and try and help yourself stick out amongst the crowd?
Well, I think at Inside the Pylon, especially, instead of just doing the generic mock draft, we try and explain to people in a simple but detailed way how a player fits schematically into a team. Whereas a lot of mock drafts, there's background, but there isn't saying, oh, well, TJ Watt, he'd work well as a strong side linebacker in Seattle's 4-3 defense. That sort of thing. And coming on to the point we've Zeb and Sammy talked about before, I'd say a potential surprise pick could be edge rusher Sam in the first round. If all the defensive back talent's there and they can't trade down, they might go for sort of edge rusher Sam type. I mean, Tim Williams, it could be a bit of a reach. He's projected to be a second rounder, I'd say, but they've had a private workout with him. And then also, I mentioned him before, but TJ Watt is another guy who could come in and play a bit of 4-3 Sam linebacker.
Well, let's actually go into topic number 2. So topic number 2 is all about draft surprises. We talked briefly that Lynch has already been traded for a 2018 pick, and there's been more clarification about Richard Sherman. So last week we talked and we all kind of agree that Richard Sherman, regardless of the relationship between him and the front office, they're most likely playing together. John Schneider and Pete Carroll's words, they've kind of, reiterated that multiple times in this past week as he's reported. There's pictures of him, Richard Sherman, along with Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor, so a lot of people are definitely excited about that. But the draft is always about surprises, and one of the things that you mentioned, Maddie, was if they think that there are corners available in the second round, they might do something different, such as get that edge rusher or that Sam, which to me seems like that's one of the least likely things that they should do, because they've got a Cliff Averill, they've got a Michael Bennett, they've got a Frank Clark, and they've got a kind of an underwhelming Cassius Marsh, but those are 3 top flight edge rushers and a guy who can come in and show a high motor, get some pressure. Is that really a surprise that you feel? Because a lot of that, like you said, it kind of depends on how the draft falls, right?
Yeah, I definitely think that Sam, or that taking a Sam in the first round would be a shock, especially with how the league's moving more to their base is now nickel. Sam isn't on the field after like the second or third downs. So would you really take that sort of talent in the first? I mean, TJ Watt could move to the defensive line and rush the passer on more passing downs and in nickel packages, and he'd be really adept at that. But there might be better value at other positions.
So, Maddie, another question for you, and then we'll get thoughts from Ross and Zeb here. But because the draft is predicated on waiting for what other teams do, when you're trying to scout for all these players that potentially fit, and in this case we talked about edge rushers, have you ever found a situation where it says, this is the obvious Seattle guy, they're going to take him, and then you in fact actually see them do that? Maybe they move down for him, maybe they get him a little bit later, but is that something that you've ever seen yourself or seen other people try and predict because that was such a typical or, obvious pick, where it's almost not even a surprise that they went after someone like that?
I'll be honest, with the Seahawks, it's often a bit of a surprise. I mean, in this, I think Tyler Lockett was a player that I envisioned them potentially trading up for. He's sort of that speedy athlete that they crave, and also very, very competitive. This draft, I thought that guy could be Rasul Douglas, cornerback from West Virginia, who could go as high as the third round, I'd say. He had 8 interceptions last year, and he's sort of Richard Sherman-y in the way that he jumps through zones and reads offensive concepts. But athletically, he's not like Richard Sherman. So I'm not sure how likely that is.
So Ross, I'll start with you first. You've been a fan for, I think, longer than all of us. What surprises do you recall, especially with this current front office with John Schneider and Pete Carroll, that you were either like surprised with and said like, oh yeah, that's good, or it's kind of like, oh wow, where did that come from?
To be honest, like I said, I normally let the draft come to me. I don't invest a lot. I do remember when Russell Wilson was first drafted, thinking that was a wasted pick, and really surprised and shocked because apparently I know nothing. I had read he was too short, and that was pretty much gospel still to say at the time. And there was even some doubt, how much is he really, really committed to football? Is baseball still in the back of his mind? And I was convinced that was like a wasted pick. You and I went to training camp that year, and I was just like, there's that little dude. And from day one, he surprised me, obviously, and I started, realizing how stupid I was. But early on, it was a pretty much of a why'd they throw away that pick kind of feeling. So, yeah. So that's one. I own that.
That same the 2012 draft is the one I remember in particular. I thought we were going to go pass rusher, and I was looking at I think Upshaw, who ended up going to Baltimore. And we took Bruce Irvin, and everybody in the building went, "Who?" And he obviously it's paid off in certain aspects. He's turned into a he turned into a pretty good player before he left. But I'm always thinking pass rusher, and they always get a pass rusher, but it's never the guy who I think they were going to go after, like Frank Clark a couple years ago. I don't think I ever remember seeing his name before the draft. So they always they tend to get the position I think we're going to go for, but it's never the guy I think it's going to be.
Sure. I think for me, the biggest surprise that I can remember is actually before I was even that big of a fan. It's when they traded Joey Galloway for 2 first-round picks. And at the time, Joey Galloway was franchised. He sat up for half a year, reported for the other half of the year, so he could get a whole year of, contract accrual, and then, he would be another year as a veteran. And then I thought, wow, they traded him for 2 first-round picks. Well, that seems super easy. I do that in Madden all the time. And then, multiple decades later, that doesn't happen anymore. Like, the Seahawks have definitely made a lot of trades for first-round picks. Obviously sometimes we disagree with it. Deion Branch, Percy Harvin, Jimmy Graham, those are all very high-profile draft picks the Seahawks traded away to acquire players, and it hasn't always been to their benefit. And kind of like what you and what Zeb and Ross have said is, it's very hard for me as a fan who loves the game to understand the concept of the draft and being able to really filter through any of it, because there is so much that we don't know, and so many things kind of wait until the very last minute before we actually decide what we'll see. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. We usually do predictions later, but might as well do this now. Do you guys envision, Maddie, I'll start with you, what percentage would you give the Seahawks trade out of the first round for another year in the John Schneider, Pete Carroll era?
I'd say 100% that they trade down. Whether that's out of the first round, I'm not sure. I mean, there's talk of them. Schefter even was reporting that they're talking with the Falcons over swapping 4th round picks and then letting the Falcons trade up to 26, and we'd be at 31.
Yeah.
So, yeah, what you said, give a percentage. So trade out of the first round, I'd say 30%, because I think that'd be the Falcons deal.
Nice. Ross, what about you?
100% chance they want to. Like a 5% chance they're actually able to do it, I think. I don't think there's a lot of... Where they're drafting, I don't think a lot of people are willing to move up. That's my feeling. The Falcons deal sounds a little bit weird to me. That sounds like the deal you kind of make on draft day when like the guy you want has fallen. But we're sitting here the day before. Nobody knows where anybody's falling. Maybe the guy the Falcons are targeting is already gone well before us. I really don't think see that happening. Maybe it's in place in case, but if it's so obvious at that point, then the Seahawks could really kind of, if they really knew exactly what guy the Falcons were targeting, they could actually ask for more. So the Falcons thing sounds to me like some intern in an office got a whiff of a conversation just reporting it more than it's really for him. It's just way too specific to me to have heard it 2 days before the draft.
Yeah, I think it's super crazy to hear that rumor come out right before the draft.
Yeah, I think if they're targeting somebody like Bowles or Lamb and they're there at 26, they probably pull the trigger on them. But barring that, I think it's But I agree with Maddie pretty much. 100% chance that they're trading down if one of those guys isn't there, and then whether it's out of the first round or not, I don't know. Tough to say, but I think they'd probably be looking to trade down most likely at that point.
Yeah, so what's crazy is someone put on Twitter the last 11 years for the 25th and 26th pick in the draft, and more than 50% of the time a 25th or 26th pick has been traded. So it's kind of a weird pick because it doesn't seem very attractive on paper, but if someone falls, it's a scramble. People want to get that pick. Seahawks moved with the Broncos and they were able to get Paxton Lynch. Seattle moved to the end of the first round. They got Jermaine Defetti, and then they got Jaron Reed in the second round. So it's definitely a possibility. I'm probably closer to Ross, where I say 100% they want to do it. But unless someone falls, and my guess is it has to be a quarterback. Mahomes is one of the guys I see that potentially is going to be there in the late first round. If him or one of the other quarterbacks, Deshaun Watson maybe, if one of those two guys is available at 26, I definitely see the Seahawks making a move because someone's going to want to try and grab them. Because it's one of the teams that's going to be in the second round that wants to move up. They're going to have to give up a little bit more because they can't wait 6-7 more picks to let some other team go. Because if the Browns and the Niners haven't selected a quarterback in the first round, those two teams are the most likely the ones that are going to want to fulfill that.
Browns don't need a quarterback.
I think it could also maybe be a cornerback where like there's a plethora of them this year, but if somebody's really thinking they can get one in the second round, but there's a big run on them, I could see somebody even like a team like Green Bay or whatever, who maybe wants to like roll the dice on Sidney Jones moving back up if they think they're not going to get anybody. Sidney Jones obviously is not going to be around maybe till October, but
they said September. Latest thing I heard, Sidney Jones can play in September.
Maybe. But like you would think that injury would have moved him out, but if there's like a run and all the good, if everybody's kind of convinced themselves this is the year to get a cornerback and then they're all gone, I could see somebody wanting to move back up into the first round to grab that.
What I'd say about the cornerback class as well, adding to that point, is it's quite top heavy. Like everyone talks about the depth of it, but it's mainly sort of first, second rounders rather than your depth. And I'd also say they're hurt by Seattle are hurt by the fact that Houston, who probably could take a quarterback, especially if one drops, are picking one pick before them.
So how about this really quick, and then we'll move on. But the cornerback from Ohio State, Conley, he's been linked to an assault allegation. He and his team, they're obviously denying it, but that's going to affect his draft stock. We see that with other guys. Guys come in with baggage, they drop further than expected. But it seems like that's also like the greatest place to target a guy at the end of the first round if you're a team that really sees like we can look past this or we think that this is going to subside. We don't think it's a real issue. It seems like that's potentially something that could also happen as well.
Is that the guy that's facing the rape accusation?
Yes. Conley from Ohio State.
Okay.
I think he's going undrafted. I don't think a team can take someone who's been accused of sexual assault, whether he's guilty or not. I don't think he'll be a day 3 pick at best for him.
Who was the guy?
Say, bring him in.
Who was the guy last year?
Let Pete work with him.
That was he was never charged, but his girlfriend was murdered.
Lyle Collins.
That was a tackle that signed a free agent, like undrafted free agent deal with Dallas, right?
Yeah.
And he was
never charged with anything. He was never arrested. He was just questioned, and it came out just before the draft. He was projected to go quite high, and then it just plummeted his draft stock. And I see no reason why that won't happen with Conley.
Yeah.
Who is the gas mask Bong guy? What happened with him last year?
Yeah.
Tunsil.
He still went pretty high, I think.
Yeah. He went number 8 to the Dolphins. I think. I'm not sure, but he had a mini fall because he was potentially a number 1 overall pick, wasn't he?
That cost him millions.
Yeah, I remember thinking that was a fake video.
He doesn't want to go to the Browns.
I wonder what that sort of moment will be this year, if there is one. But there always seems to be something crazy. He went 13 to the Dolphins.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on. So we're going to go to topic number 3. So topic number 3, this is the Homer Corner. Maddie, I asked this to you when you went on the 3-Step Drop podcast. It's talking about what draft pick do you fall for? Do you have a type? So I don't have the expertise that you do. I don't see the players in the same way. I watch the local college football team and whatever team they're playing. So my grasp of all the players out there is not very good. But I definitely have a quote unquote type that I like the Seahawks to draft. And a lot of times I definitely get disappointed, and that's probably why I can't follow the draft as much. But for you, which you've made this a big part of who you are and what you do, how do you feel about that? Do you ever fall in love with the guy and say, you know what, if any team takes this, they're gonna go far?
Well, it's not necessarily go far, but I really like running backs who are versatile and can catch and do it all. So last year it was Kenneth Dixon. He got drafted by the Ravens and he went a bit lower than I thought he would. And Seattle took Procise instead. Dixon was my guy, and then he had an injury-plagued season and is now going to be serving a 4-game PD suspension. So, it remains to be seen if he can make it work in the league. But then this year, the similar guy, small school, versatile running backs, Kareem Hunt, who I really like. I mean, it's not very logical, and obviously Seattle aren't going to take a running back, I don't think. But yeah, that's my type. I'd say a guy who I'd love the Seahawks to draft would be Marcus May from Florida. It's not necessarily a type, but I think he'd be a great third safety. He'd be able to set the run, and he's very versatile. And they could even play him as a robber in cover one coverage.
Where would he fall? Where would he be slotted to be picked up?
Third, second, potentially late first. Again, it's that thing of this draft class being quite hard to predict because of all the players being on relatively equal footing, and then it coming down to team preference more so than usual.
Zeb, what about you? You got a draft type?
Not anymore.
Burned too many times?
Burned too many times.
I've learned to let go. Yeah, because I almost always have a pass rusher that I fall in love with, like I said earlier. And then it never happens, so I've had to learn to kind of just let it be. You know what? If it's meant to be, let them go, and they'll come back.
What about you, Ross?
It's funny. I actually have the exact opposite type from Maddie when it comes to running backs. With the way that college football goes these days, there's so many running backs that are sort of the hybrid, like the do everything guys. You can catch, you can kind of run. I always look for the running back that's the throwback, the guy who can run between the tackles, the guy that the Seahawks or the Panthers want, like the guy who is hardcore, the Earl Campbell classic type. Because I think there's a place, and I think teams still want them. They're just not available. That's not how college gets played. The other type I have, it's kind of like an off the field thing. I'm always attracted when I see like a college football player who's got a 5-year scholarship, but finishes his degree in 3 years or 3.5 or 4 years. Is already like well done with his degree. This is going to sound stupid, but that's always really attractive because when I think about that character type and how driven they are, how much classwork and schoolwork they got done while still playing football, that's really, really attractive to me. And I think this is a lot about character. Obviously, there's a lot more to playing football than character, but if you're that driven in the classroom to improve and that balance of a person, I think it's a positive. I know some people think it's a negative, or maybe they're not all in on football, but for me, it's a positive. I think overall it's worked out.
Yeah, I definitely have a type as well, and it's wide receivers. Usually it's when they're drafted. Like, I think they're going to be awesome. It's true with Tyler Lockett, true with Golden Tate, John Butler. Let's see, I'm trying to go even further back. Who's the guy that they got from Kentucky that they let go? Chris Harper, is that him?
Harper.
Yeah. So I get enamored with wide receivers, and the reason why I think it is because the draft does such a good job of showing like amazing highlights. You know, it shows guys making amazing catches. They're 10, 15 yards past coverage. So I definitely fall in love with that because obviously everyone likes scoring. You know, being a fan of this current Seahawks team, I definitely feel like defense is starting to take over. But I always think about, wide receivers, because they are so flashy. I saw this great quote on Twitter, and someone basically said, all the players coming up, and this is, I think, true for quarterbacks and for offensive linemen, is that college football is basketball on grass. And the point behind that is basically saying, like, it's all about scoring. There's no defense, there's no skill, it's just pure athleticism beating athleticism. I don't know if that's necessarily 100% accurate, but that's something that the Seahawks have kind of like said again and again. Like, they can't get that offensive lineman that knows how to pull or doesn't know how to play the position compared to, you know, getting some defensive tackle and throwing them out there and getting the same thing.
Well, I write about the Big 12, and it's definitely basketball and grass in that conference.
Which is funny because the other thing that people mention is like, teams like Michigan State, Michigan, Washington, Alabama, they play a pro style offense. It doesn't mean that they can't score, but because they play a pro style offense, teams definitely are much more attracted to their players just because the learning curve is maybe not as steep. But like you said, Maddie, if an entire conference is playing to score as many points as possible, I mean, that seemed what the national championship game was like when it was Clemson versus Alabama.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's like Mahomes playing in Texas Tech. He passed for ridiculous. He had 9,500 yards in his last 2 seasons, which is insane. But it's a wide open offense predicated on deep shots and against pretty terrible defenses. So that's why it's a transition for him into the NFL. Whereas someone like, I don't know, a more pro-style quarterback, say Trubisky, he's had a bit, not even a pro-style offense, but slightly more pro-style than Mahomes. He's given a bit more of the benefit of the doubt.
Do you see that ever changing? I don't know if this is something that you've seen because you do scout.
I think it has to eventually. I think because college isn't changing anytime soon, and college is the feeder to American football, to the NFL. So,
but that also seems why guys that potentially no one's really ever heard of, unless you're really a hardcore watcher of the game, where a guy like Carson Wentz and Jared Goff can be the number 1, number 2 draft pick, or Joe Flacco, or any of these guys that come from slightly smaller schools but play in a pro-style offense, they can leapfrog, guys that are putting up those ridiculous numbers, like you said with Mahomes, putting up 9,000 plus years in what is essentially a season and a half of NFL football, comparative to the number of games that they're playing.
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
That all kind of feeds into what Tom Cable's been saying for years now, right? That when it comes to offensive linemen, like, you're going to have to teach them from scratch pretty much anyway. So you might as well just pick the best athlete rather than having to pick somebody who's been playing tackle for a few years, because they're going to have to start from the beginning anyway, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I would think eventually some major college programs would kind of make some adjustments and kind of go back to some more pro-style things and use that as a recruiting tool. Yeah, you may not finish number 1 in the country, the school's ranking, but you're more likely to get drafted and be successful in the NFL if you play with us, because you're going to get real meaningful experience. Also, I think that's a bit of way some colleges might be able to moneyball things. If you can't get the premier athletes that fit in those sort of track star kind of offenses going on now, get a different type that defenses aren't equipped to play. If you went off to a hardcore, bruising running style with beat 'em up offensive linemen against some of those teams that aren't equipped to play that kind of defense, you'd have some success, I think. So
yeah, it'll swing back the other way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting because, like Maddie, you said you scout the entire SEC. That's what, 14 teams now?
Yeah.
I mean, those.
I mainly focused on defensive backs, running backs, and cornerbacks and safeties.
I mean,
but,
and you're able to see those guys, and you see like the skill sets, the way that they're coached, the way that they're run offensively, defensively. I think it's going to be a lot harder because, to your point, Ross, that yes, smaller schools that can't get the 4 and 5 star recruits are going to get the transfers. They're going to get the 2 and 3 star guys and kind of build them up. But that means it's going to take them so much longer. Their opportunity to reload and become a threat in their conference or in their division, it's going to be that much harder because it's not going to be every year. It's going to be every 2 to 3, maybe even 4 years, because all those guys have to kind of grow together. It'll definitely be interesting to see what happens with the draft. All right. So that actually leads us to a good point. We're going to talk actually about topic number 4 here. And it's really talking about the history of the Seahawks. From 2010, which is John and Pete's first year, to 2012, those have always been highlighted as the cornerstone drafts. from 2013 to 2016, they're not considered cornerstone drafts just because the talent that they've acquired has not gone to that same level. So that leads to a lot of questions. Has the front office lost a step? Maddie, what's your take on this?
I think it's harsh to say they lost a step. I mean, their first few years have set the bar incredibly high, and perhaps now we saw some of the worst years of Schneider and maybe an average year. I mean, the Lockett and Marsh draft. Clark. That draft looks pretty good. That's two quality starters. Yeah, I don't think the front office has lost a step. I think partly also the league's caught up, and partly Carroll has lesser knowledge of college players now that he's been out of the college game for a few more years.
That's actually a point that, Ross, you've made quite a few times, that the guys that Carroll was able to draft in 2010 to 2012, those are guys that he recruited as a college coach, which gave him an advantage that he no longer has now. What is your take on how the Seahawks have had seen this big divide in their drafting ability?
I mean, that's obviously part of it. It's unmistakable. He didn't. Although I've kind of moved somewhat away from that. I think it's still part of it. I think some of it's something more about the draft. There have been a couple of bad years for drafts overall, haven't there? And then you look at some of the players. I mean, some of them were sort of like once in a career, as a front office career kind of person. I mean, has there been another third round quarterback that looks like it's potential Hall of Fame after that? I mean, did they miss on some Richard Shermans that were out there, like a fifth round player that looks, well, again, potentially Hall of Famer? I don't know if they've missed a lot. Maybe it just hasn't been there. That's part of it, I think, as well. But I also think that the drafts aren't as bad as they seem, because I think in some ways they've made up for it with some undrafted finds and things like that. Again, I think it's a bit harsh to say they've lost a step. They haven't hit as many things. Drafting is really, really hard. Football, American style football, is really, really hard, isn't it? Because it's unlike almost any other. Baseball is a series of one-on-one competitions. Football's all about context. It's really, really, really hard to isolate somebody. It's really, really hard to scout it. So some of it's just maybe just statistical things kind of balancing out. I don't know. We'll see.
Seb, what's your take?
I full on buy into the Pete Carroll having an advantage early in his professional career in Seattle. I think the reason why we were able to hit so hard in those later rounds, such great picks like Cam and Richard, is because he that's what he planned for. I think that's exactly what he wanted to do. And I think he said it himself a couple years ago, he's spent now. All the guys he was recruiting, they're all older now, and they're all in the league or not. So his advantage is up. It's spent. I think that was really a big part of why we were so good in those early drafts.
So does that mean we're kind of done? I mean, if we don't have the advantage of Russell Wilson's small salary, we don't have the advantage of having the special side of the players. Are the Seahawks on the downside?
No, I think that Pete Carroll and John Schneider are still good talent evaluators. I just don't, I think we had a crazy advantage because of what Pete was able to do early. I don't think we have that advantage anymore. So they can still hit. I mean, I fully expect them to still make a couple of really good picks tomorrow, or in the next couple of days. So yeah, I don't think it's over. But
I think last year's and the year before's weren't as bad as we're maybe thinking as well. They're just, some of them are still developing.
I think 2013 is awful.
Yeah.
There's only one player on the Seahawks team that's actually still on the team from that 2013 class, and that's Luke Wilson. We all talked about how, if we lose him in free agency, none of us are going to cry. He ended up signing a 1-year deal. I love him. I've talked about how funny of a character he is. But I think that does say a lot. Now, I definitely don't fall into the camp that the Seahawks have lost a step. And the reason why I don't think that way is because they're rarely drafting for a huge need. Offensive line has obviously been something that they've tried to work towards, whether it's getting free agency like Javari Evans last year or Bradley Sowell last year and Luke Jokel and Ibushi this year. So they're trying to find a way, and I think as we talked about earlier, the NFL draft doesn't really create great offensive linemen anymore. If the Seahawks can get like a guy like Bowles with the 10-26 pick, even though he is a little bit older, his opportunity to be great, maybe that's what teams will start have to doing, looking for guys that have been in the system for 4+ years. But my biggest concern with the draft is, are they drafting starters or are they drafting depth? And in 2010 to 2012, they were definitely drafting starters. In 2013 to 2016, the guys that they were drafting for were not necessarily starters. They drafted Kristen Michael. He wasn't going to be a starter. They drafted Tyler Lockett in 2014. They didn't even think that he was going to be a starting wide receiver. They thought he was just going to be a special teams guy. They drafted Frank Clark, knowing that Michael Bennett and Cliff Averill were in front of him. Jaron Reed last year, he was the guy that was kind of highlighted to say, like, hey, he's going to take the Brandon Mebane role. And I think that's something that has hurt the Seahawks. They don't have huge holes in their starting offense or defense, so that they're forced to draft for depth, and then not necessarily that they're getting the same level of competition that helps those guys grow. Whereas a 5th rounder in Cam Chancellor and a 5th rounder in Richard Sherman, yes, they did have to sit in their first year behind someone with Lawyer Malloy and Marcus Trufant, but once they got that opportunity, they ran with it. And maybe that was Carroll and Schneider's inside track. They knew these guys had that drive and desire, even though they got picked in the 5th round. So
yeah.
Do you think we'd be back in that phase now? Because the fact is, we're not a young team. We used to think of ourselves as young. We're not. We're getting older. 28, 29, everybody's there. Now we're looking at somebody who might want to sit a year and then be the starter.
I think you also have to look at where they've been picking. They're picking at the start of rounds early in their tenure, and now it's towards the end because we're a good team. And also, I think you have to consider that I don't know where I'm going with this. Come back to me.
But to your point, Matt, I think that is something that we forget. They got to draft the 6th and 15th pick in 2010. They got to draft, I think it was 15th overall in the 2012 draft, when they were able to get Bruce Irvin, Bobby Wagner, and some shorty named Russell Wilson. Whereas now they're drafting in the 20s and sometimes 30s because they have done so well. And that talent gap between the 15th pick and the 26th pick is huge, because people talk about saying, talent-wise, there are only about 10 to 15 actual first-round draft picks. Everyone else kind of just falls by the wayside.
Yeah. My point was, I think they got a bit too cute at times in certain drafts, trying to fill a position on the roster rather than just going for the home run pick. And Schneider's mentioned that they're consciously trying to change something about how they draft. So hopefully we'll see that in action tomorrow.
Yes.
Or it'll be like almost every other year where they just trade out at the end of the first round and we're like, oh, well, that was a wasted day.
Trade up for the first.
All right. Any more thoughts about the past few drafts from the Seahawks front office? All right. So we're going to go on to our fan topics and questions. We actually don't have any questions today, which is all right, because we actually have a lot of predictions that we want to go over. So we all offered our opinions on whether or not someone was going to, if the Seahawks were going to trade out of the first round. Seems like we're all in consensus. That's what they want to do. The likelihood of that happening.
Can I ask a related question to Maddie? Is there anybody, say it gets to 22nd, we pick 26th. Is anybody you would actually consider trading up for?
No.
Okay.
No, the way the draft is with the sort of bunch of early second round talent, and it's sort of in this draft, it's sort of like I'd say about 15, 17 onwards to like I don't know 48, 50. They can all be moved up or down depending on your scheme, and more so than any other draft. They're all on a relatively equal footing, and I definitely want them to trade down rather than trade up.
Right.
It's the 1 year I'd be happy. Like, I wouldn't be frustrated at having to stay up till, I don't know, 4 a.m. to watch them just say, oh, yeah, Seattle have traded their selection. They'll be picking tomorrow. Like, great, thanks.
Yeah, exactly.
So kind of with that, do you feel that teams really value their draft picks based upon, I think we've all seen it. Jimmy Johnson had his draft chart of what each pick was worth. People have kind of come up with newer versions of that. Because the cost to trade up seems to be so steep, do you ever see the Seahawks ever actually moving up? Is there a guy that you've ever seen, whether it's in this draft or previous drafts, where you could say that's a guy that they would try and go after?
I think given where they're picking, I don't think so. Maybe if they were in like the top 10, or if they had to need a quarterback or something, then potentially. Or it was like a Tyler Lockett situation where you need to fill a need on the roster, and you've got a talent who's still there, and you can trade up for him, and it's not going to cost too much draft capital. But to move up in the first round is pretty expensive, and I don't think from a Seahawks situation when they're picking late in the first every year, I don't think that'd ever really be worth it. No one's going to fall that far to make it worth it.
All right. Any more questions for Maddie? We'll get into some predictions.
I think we're good.
All right. So, trading down in the first round, we all want it. Probably not going to happen. Question number 2. Do the Seahawks get a good or bad draft grade from all the draft gurus? The Mel Kipers, the Todd McShays, all those guys. We've seen historically, especially in that 2012 draft, the Seahawks got killed. They were getting Fs, Fs, Fs. But now people are kind of like not willing to second guess them as much, thinking that the Seahawks know something that they don't. Maddie, do you think the Seahawks are going to get a good grade, even though the Seahawks won't care?
I was going to mention the 2012 draft because they're just so scared. I don't think they're just scared it's going to bite them in the arse again. So they just go like B+. Being a fan in the UK, especially when I had less knowledge of the game, because I obviously haven't grown up with it, I'd always read through what grades are given the Seahawks draft, and I slowly noticed that they'd just be like B+ every year because they're just like, oh, 2012 happened, oh, 2011 happened, so yeah. So well, yeah, I'd predict we'd get a B+.
Regardless, they could draft all punters, and they'll be like, Seahawks know what they're doing, B+.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure it's already penciled in. I mean, it's already like they've written in the B, and then like based on who they actually pick, they're either going to put plus or minus or leave it alone at B, right? I mean, it's already predetermined.
Yeah.
Same thing with almost all the quality teams. Like you just don't see them. They've all made the experts look dumb at one point, and I think like Green Bay and the Patriots, or whatever, already have like B or A right next to the name, and it's just a matter of filling in the plus or the minus. Isn't it? And the Browns, the Browns are the Browns. You put in the D, and you're going to go D- or D+.
No, you give the Browns an A+ now because you're scared of the analytics.
Well, that's true. I mean,
yeah.
You're also like afraid of I mean, if you get 2 picks in the first round, unless you're going to say like everybody who said those were good players are bad, you have to. Yeah, that's true.
I think the Browns get an A no matter what, because anybody has to be an improvement, right? Like, just the fact that they're bringing in live bodies has to help in some capacity.
Well, you would think so, but last year didn't. Like, they had 2 first-round picks 2 years ago, or whatever, and they're out of the league.
Yeah,
right. It just failed.
Oh.
Yeah.
Then who is it? It was Johnny Manziel, and who was the other first-round pick?
Where Richardson?
Trent Richardson, was that the same draft?
I don't think that was the same draft. Maybe it was. I forget. But they had 2 first-round picks. They're both out of the league a couple years later. It's ridiculous.
It's
Was
ridiculous.
Was it Phil Taylor? Is that?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. That's it. It's Phil Taylor and Johnny Manziel. And they're out of the league.
But no, Taylor was in the 2011 draft.
Was it? Oh, who is it?
They probably drafted a guy that looked exactly like Phil Taylor, and they're just like, you know what? We drafted him before. We can't miss twice in a row. I assume that's how their front office operates, you know.
Well, plus Trent Richardson ain't shit anymore anyway either. So
What's crazy? He still got a first-round draft pick. Once everyone saw how terrible he was.
Justin Gilbert, Oklahoma State.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah, Gilbert
Godfrey.
Yeah. He's gone. Johnny Manziel's gone. Then they picked Joel. Oh man, it's a tragic draft.
Zeb, what's your draft grade prediction? Good or bad for the Seahawks?
I don't know. It depends on what happens right now. I'm gonna say who how many people give us draft grades? So we get Kuiper.
Todd McShay
Rob
does it.
Rang.
Mayock.
Does Mayock do one? Okay, Mayock's
Pretty sure. Yeah.
Mayock would give us the best, most accurate draft grade. He'll give us like a B plus or an A minus. Kuiper will probably give us like a C or a C plus.
Yeah.
Prisco.
What's that?
But
Does Prisco do one? I'm pretty sure
Prisco does, but I don't read any of his stuff.
Briscoe's gonna be like Seahawks D.
Yeah.
Yeah, automatically.
Yeah. I'm basically in the same camp as you guys. Seahawks, whether they deserve it or not, they're a perennial playoff team. They're going to get a B average for their draft. They could draft all punters, and Todd McShay will be like, well, they obviously know what they're doing. B plus. It's going to be something crazy. Second question about predictions. Are you personally going to be happy or sad after the draft concludes on Saturday? Maddie, how do you think you're going to feel?
Probably quite tired, but I'm having a barbecue with a friend who's a Saints fan, so I'll probably be happy at how they've managed to pick more offensive players rather than defense, which is what he's craving. So I'll be laughing at him. Another wide receiver, but I'm always happy after Seahawks drafts because I always start talking myself into the picks, even if I wasn't that keen on them, and watching their college highlights again and their game film and trying to envision how they'd fit into the Seahawks, and searching for bad photoshops of them and into the Seahawks blue. Yeah, I get proper into that. So
Nice.
So yeah.
Zeb, how are you gonna feel? You gonna be feeling pretty good after the draft?
Yeah, when I was a kid and time used to move really slowly, the draft was such an island of awesome. Like, because between the end of the season, of course, as a Seahawks fan, the end of the season usually came pretty early.
Yeah.
And the draft, it was a long stretch of time, and being the off season, I hated it. I couldn't wait for football to come back. So having the draft was like football's back a little bit, but then it's over, and then it's still a whole nother freaking 3 or 4 months before actual football comes back. So now that I'm however old I am, and time just cruises by, it's like it's going to be preseason or training camp before we know it. So hopefully I enjoy the draft. I get to enjoy it, and I get to be excited about the picks, and makes me excited, makes me look forward to actually seeing some real life football.
Yeah. Ross, what about you? What time? It's 8:00 Eastern, 5:00 Pacific time, I think, is when the first round starts. What time is that going to be for you, Ross?
Tuesday.
We lost Ross. So, Maddie,
it's going to be, for me, that would be 1 a.m.
1 a.m.? That's not too bad. You got up super early for this, or you stayed up super late for this podcast.
Well, so. I had an essay, which I thought was due in today. Turns out it's due in on the 3rd of May, so I had another 6 days to do it. And so I did an all-nighter, and I'm kind of regretting it now. But it's at least I've done the essay. 6 days.
So you're ready for bed, in other words.
No, I'm actually doing okay. Second wind.
Good.
Lights coming through my window. So yeah,
there you go. There you go. Yeah, I don't know how anyone can't be happy after the draft. Even if you feel that they made the worst mistake or they missed a guy, everyone thinks that their team has a chance this year. You could be drafting number 1, and the NFL allows you to make a run. That's one of the greatest things about football. There's a greater opportunity for a team to make a run out of nowhere than there is in a lot of other sports, and the draft is like the perfect example of that. So I don't know anyone that will actually be down on their teams drafting. Maybe Philly fans, because they apparently hate everything. Jets fans too. Like they doesn't matter who their teams pick, they're gonna hate and boo whoever.
Where
gets
is the
drafted.
draft this year?
It's in Philly this year.
Okay.
And
outdoors.
Yeah. Funny note
on
about
the rocky steps.
Jesus, who's hosting? Bill Burr.
So funny thing about the draft, because it's such a thing. The baseball team that's playing in Philadelphia, the away team, couldn't get hotel in Philadelphia this weekend, so they actually have to go to like a town further away and then bus into Philadelphia to go play their baseball game because all the hotels have been booked by the NFL draft, all the teams, all the players. So it kind of shows you how big and what a monster the NFL draft has become.
I think the draft is better than any baseball game.
Yeah, for sure. Waiting those 12 minutes for each pick to come through, way more entertaining.
It's so much fun, though. I don't know why. It's great. It's fantastic. I love it.
It's ridiculous.
So
it's ridiculous.
Here's
like,
a question.
especially to an English person, it's so like wow. I wish we had something similar for soccer. I mean, the logistics of that would be pretty impossible to implement, but the draft is just brilliant.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
I'm so excited.
So here's a question for you guys, because I know both of you guys are on Twitter. You guys are both very active in social media. Have you ever had that takeaway in the past few years where you're finding it out about a new pick or a new trade on social media before it gets reported on TV?
Yeah, I hate that. I won't even look at my Twitter during the draft. I mean, at least during the first round. Like, it's way too fast. Like, I want to see it. I want to see the announcement and be surprised.
I'll be refreshing, like, Twitter timeline, just constantly scrolling down.
Matt is going to have 10 different windows on his computer and on his cell phone.
I want spoilers.
Well, during the later rounds, because the TV gets behind now.
Yeah.
So far behind that. Yeah, in the later rounds, I'm on Twitter and I'm trying to figure it out. But that first round, I like to watch the drama unfold live.
I mean, I've mentioned it before, but when the Tunsil gas mask bong thing came out, I was just scrolling through Twitter trying to find out the pick, and then I was like, what is this?
Hey, Ross, sorry, we lost you for a second, but I'm going to ask you this question, and I'm pretty sure I know how it's going to go. When the draft happens, do you go online to find stuff out that as it's happening or before, or do you just let it come to you through the broadcast?
Depends on like the day, because some of it happens at weird times here.
So what time is the draft for you tomorrow? It starts at 5 Pacific time.
5 Pacific time, 5 p.m.?
Yes.
Yeah.
5 p.m.
So, okay, that's like mid-morning, so it's just a bad day for my secretary tomorrow, isn't it? That means I won't be doing any work tomorrow. I'll just be looking. It's funny because, I approach the draft as I don't know a lot, so I don't really have any expectations. I just let it come to me. But once the stuff starts happening, once real information starts coming in, real picks are made, then I get a little bit OCD about it, and I need to know everything about everybody who's picked. So I start, pick number 1, start reading up on that person, and reading up on that next, and the next, and the next. And the stuff I should have been doing for the weeks up to that, but I can't because I get been so discouraged and burned in the past from doing it. I start doing it basically post facto kind of, now I'm a draft expert on, what's already been done. So I get a bit, especially first couple of days where it's not too overwhelming to do that. I do that a lot.
Yeah, when it's only like 30 people to look at, it's not that difficult.
Yeah, like in the second day, it's not that much more. But then like that's when it gets to day 3 and the drafting, like the guy from the tiny little school down in Wisconsin, whatever. But yeah, when they still have stuff. I mean, but the first day, like I said, I'm an instant post facto draft expert. And so all day, I wait till it happens, and then I read up on, and basically my Friday, probably into Friday evening, will be that. And then, Friday night I'll go for drinks with friends who none of which are American or care about American football, and I will bore the shit out of them talking about the draft. And they are good friends, so they will put up with it. So,
nice. Sounds like a good use of time.
yeah. But then later on, I have to listen to like things about like Geelong, which is like an Aussie rules football team, and they get their revenge on me.
All right, well, that is our pre-draft podcast. I want to thank Matty Brown for coming and joining us. He's been gracious enough. He's going to actually join us post-draft, so we're going to have another one next week. Matty, any shout-outs that you'd like to give before we wrap up here?
Well, firstly, thanks for having me, and I'm really looking forward to next week as well, and the draft. I'd like to give a shout-out to just Inside the Pylon. They're at IT Pylon on Twitter, and then please look at the draft guide. It's www.itpdraftguide.com. It's $35 for purchase, but it also includes fantasy advice and all sorts of other goodness, such as player interviews. And shout out to Marshawn as well.
Nice.
And thank you.
Thank you. Zeb, shout outs?
Check out triplebpodcast.com. We do a podcast every other Monday at noon. A new episode comes out. And then check out the idiotsreview.com, which is our official review site for the Triple B podcast.
Nice. Ross, special announcements, shout outs.
I'd like to shout out to my cat. He's been a good boy this week.
Fantastic.
He's been a good boy. Staying off the keyboard, and I'm going to leave the last one to you, Sam.
All right. I'd like to thank Matty. I'd like to thank Ross and Zeb for joining us as always. Thank you so much for checking us out. We will be back next week, and we're super excited. The draft, it happens only once a year, but it's kind of like the best off-season event that can happen. I don't think any other event can compare, especially because every football fan is excited for it. It's coming up. I'm excited for it. I know you guys are excited for it. We'll see. We'll see if the Seahawks domination continues. And gentlemen, thank you for stopping by. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.